Namaskar and welcome to this special presentation. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. We are at DD Dialogue Hyderabad talking about the Amrit Kal budget and its various facets. In this session, we will talk about the pharmaceutical sector, the manner in which the budget, the previous reforms empowered the sectors. We're also going to talk about the road ahead. India is popularly known as the pharmacy of the world. What that really means, about 20% of the global exports in generic drugs in particular are met by India. The growth is driven by increasing demand for affordable generic drugs, both in India and abroad. We, of course, have all witnessed and benefited from the remarkable work done by the pharma sector during the years of the pandemic, during vaccine development and other initiatives. In the conversation today, we'll talk about the pharma sector vis-a-vis, as I mentioned, the budget, reforms, and also what is the road ahead in terms of opportunities and challenges. Let me give you a brief introduction to the eminent panel of guests who are joining us for this conversation. We have with us Mr. Uday Bhaskar. Mr. Uday Bhaskar is Director General of Pharmaceuticals Export Promotion Council of India, has worked in various capacities in Drugs Control Administration, member of various pharma association, and also winner of Lifetime Achievement Award at Indian Pharmaceutical Congress. Next, we have with us Mr. Bhavesh Pujara. He's President Finance at Hetero Labs Limited. He's responsible for companies' worldwide finance function, including financial reporting, business partnering, taxation, treasury, and risk management, with over 2 decades of experience with reputed companies, particularly in the pharma sector. Next, we have with us Mr. Chakravarti AVPS. He is CEO, MD of EcoBliss India and representing Federation of Pharma Entrepreneurs and CII, Pharma and Life Sciences. An influential leader in pharma and packaging, he's awarded Pharma Ratna for his outstanding contribution to brand India pharma promotion globally. And finally, we have with us Mr. Nagarjun Maladi. He's Vice President and Group Delivery Head, Semiconductor Vertical in Tech Mahindra. He's a proven IT business leader with experience in leading teams providing technology, IT solutions, and enabling digital journey of various customers under manufacturing, finance, healthcare, pharma, and also life sciences domains. Let's put our hands together for our eminent panel and a warm welcome to each one of you. The manner in which most of us know the pharma industry in the country, we take pride in Indian pharma industry called the pharmacy of the world. But many of us are unaware of the insight as to how does it work, where does the strengths that really lie. If we could begin with your opening comments on this whole idea of India as the pharmacy of the world. As far as manufacturing capacity is concerned, the huge market is concerned, affordability of the medicines that we make are concerned. If you could take us through the strengths of our pharma sector first. Udayji, if I can begin with you.
Thank you. India is called as pharmacy of the world. We're exporting drugs to more than 200 countries. And, not only the exporting values, we can claim that we saved hundreds of millions of population from the dreaded diseases like malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV in the poor countries by providing efficacious drugs at a very affordable price. That is the positive note. So we are 30% of our exports are going to US, and 55% of our exports are going to highly regulated markets. So that is the reason everybody talks about India, and India is catering to the needs of the global population. We are playing a very pivotal role in saving the healthcare expenses of the global population.
Right. Mr. Bhavesh, if I can come to you, your thoughts on the native strengths of the India's pharma sector before we go on talking about the other aspects of it, your perspective on that.
Yeah, sure. So, I think if we look back over the journey of this industry over the last 4 to 5 decades, it started at a very nascent stage of serving the domestic consumers. And from there, it has gone through multiple phases of evolution and, like what now we want to call it as like a pharmacy of the world. But this entire journey has multiple dimensions to it. So capitalizing and leveraging on the strong home market, the capabilities that we developed, We then capitalized on that, and then we started looking outward. And over a period of time, we have built a robust industry, close to $50 billion, half of which is domestic market, half of which is exports. In the export dynamics, we straddle across the spectrum. So we export to most regulated market like United States, and we probably serve to the poorest country in the continent, in the world, by providing affordable medicine. So this has all been culmination of the R&D and the manufacturing strength that has been developed over a period of time. We have moved up the value chain gradually in the pharma space. Starting from API, we have moved the value chain up in terms of formulations, and now the newer technologies like complex generics and injectables. What has also happened over a period of time is that in terms of our quality standards, also we have upgraded significantly. So probably, India would be a place where we have the largest number of US FDA approved sites outside US. India is a country which has got probably the largest number of new product approvals, ANDA approvals rather, which are awarded to an industry in a particular country. So this is the dimension on the quality aspects where we have scaled up significantly. And the third dimension to it is that everything that government is doing in making the India pharma and the healthcare space more robust, that also has a rub-on effect on the pharma industry. Pharma industry is also a key component of the healthcare infrastructure in the country. So everything that is happening on the access front with Ayushman Bharat and Jan Aushadhi Kendras. So these are all initiatives towards making the healthcare available to the end patient, and that continues to create a robust market, and that also has an effect on the pharma industry. So that has been the journey. Obviously, as things evolve, the landscape is changing globally, landscape is changing in terms of the supply chain dynamics. There are headwinds in terms of the geopolitical dimensions around supply chain, vulnerabilities arising out of it. I think the government is engaging with the industry, and then there are meaningful and right steps also which are being taken in this direction. And I think many of these are reflected in the current budget announcements as well.
We'll talk about those headwinds also in the conversation. Ahead, Mr. Chakravarti, if I can come to you, for decades you've closely monitored the evolution of the pharmaceutical sector. Your thoughts, sir, in the manner in which it has been able to so far being people-centric in the country in making medicines more affordable and accessible. Your thoughts first on the strengths of the sector.
Thank you, Shubhendu. Well, I can only echo the thoughts of my co-panelists. Nevertheless, I'll try to give you a little insight into it. Not long ago, probably a few decades ago, India was really depending on the outside world, even for low-end drugs, say for example pain management drugs. Today, India is not only the pharmacy of the world, in fact the powerhouse of the generics. And it's not so easy, as Pujara said, the journey was, a lot of difficulties were there in the journey throughout. And today we are talking about number 3rd in the volume, but we are still in the number 14th in the value. But I take it in a positive spirit, because that's why we are giving affordable drugs to the world. If at all these drugs were as expensive as the Western countries were selling, probably would have been in the top 1 or top 2, top 3. Yeah, that's one factor. But moving into the same scenario in 1990s, I believe, early 90s, the world was suffering from HIVs, early stage of HIVs. Mostly some continents were really struggling because of that. And Western world developed the cocktail drugs that was costing a dose of the yearly dose around $15,000 US, right here. And Indian company, I think I can name the Cipla, they manufactured at 5% of that and they were selling it. Imagine the same regimen, same drug, same dose regimen was available at 5% of what the Western world was selling. Of course, we were treated as villains those days. India was treated because we are giving that affordable drugs. Not only that, with the help of UNICEF and all, I think the drugs were available, not only further lesser than that, and saved a few millions of lives worldwide. I think, Shubhendu, we all must agree, the COVID pandemic has really opened the eyes, because the perception in the general public is pharma industry is a killer, but the reality is other way around. I personally take a lot of pride being associated with this industry. If you throw some facts like this, I think people will understand, right? And pharma industry is not a killer, it's a savior. Just a century ago, during the last century, the live example is that the longevity of a human life is doubled just because the evolution in the pharmaceutical drugs and whatever the treatment, and lot of uncurable diseases those days, and now I think they are not even called diseases, they are just curable like any normal diseases. And thanks to the evolution of the pharmaceutical sector, the technologies, I think now we are in a commanding position. But the journey is, a way forward is a little difficult. We have to, that headwinds we need to discuss in the coming.
Absolutely, we'll come to that. If I can
but
take
definitely, what I wanted to give that message is, COVID has really taught many lessons for all of us. So let us not portray the pharma industry in the general public. Look at what pharma industry has really done it. You study for it, and what is the help it has given to the whole healthcare of the world, and then we'll understand the reality.
But the undeniable contributions of the pharmaceutical industry. If I can get the opening comment also from Nagarjuna Maladi, in terms of the infrastructure that India has, in terms of technology intervention that we are able to make as of today, how do you assess where we stand as far as the sector is concerned, sir?
So, I think the infrastructure perspective, in my opinion, if you ask the same questions 2 years back, I don't know what I would have answered. Taking the cue from what Chakravarti has told, we proved to the world as a company how strong we are, especially responding to the COVID situation. And ours is the first country. Look at the base. Among the 700 crore population on the world, we got about 140 crore here. It's not easy to scale up the processes overnight, right? Especially in a sector like healthcare and pharma, because both become critical. You asked the previous question as a patient-centric thing. Here it is like the molecule invention is the key, because you need to come up with a vaccine. Point one. Point two, dissemination of the medicine to the needed is also the key. The technology infrastructure that we built over the period of time, I think that came up very handy. Right. Not only in terms of accelerating the R&D processes, put them on a fast track to get the molecule out. Secondly, accelerating the whole supply chain management and ensuring that the world Inc. is getting the needed vaccine at right point in time. In my opinion, we are positioned really well as a country as far as the infrastructure is concerned.
So that's a remarkable example, the pandemic. In fact, we should come back to it and talk about how it's an excellent case study to see the potential of what our pharma sector can do. But again, this is DD Dialogue. We're talking about the union budget also. If you can get some views from you about the manner in which directly or indirectly you see the budget addressing the concerns of the pharma sector. Research and development is something that finds a focus each time. We'd like to learn from you your expectation of the manner in which it will play out, and also just to turn to our audience members, this is also open to you. At any point in time you'd like to participate, share a view, pharmaceutical company, medicine, something that touches all our lives, you're most welcome to. Our volunteers will pass the mic to you. Mr. Chakravarti, if I could come with that question to you about the budget aspects. How satisfied are you with the manner in which the budget addresses the concerns of the healthcare sector as a whole and pharmaceuticals in particular?
Thanks, Shubhendu. I think at an outset, I must compliment the union government. It's one of the best budgets for the pharmaceutical sector per se at an outset. In fact, I fondly remember the day before the budget was presented in the parliament, Dr. Rahul Gaulikar, the head of All India Radio here, called me for an interview. And then I expressed a couple of points. One is the hand-holding of the industry in the research and development. And the second is creating that synergies from the academic with the necessary R&D, what is required. I think both the points were really addressed in the budget. Of course, I think it's a way ahead. We're talking about how we can handhold the industry in R&D and helping these institutes like NIPER, ICMR, IITs and all not just in the molecular invention, but how we can have a total alignment, a holistic alignment with the industry, with the academic. That is the need of the hour. So far, we are leaders in the world. We are considered the generic powerhouse. And the future is going fast. It's not only in the biology and the chemistry, but also in the drug dissemination and drug administration. And the whole lot of things are going to change. I think the journey is a little tough to maintain the leadership position. I think the government's hand-holding is very much essential. It's going in the right direction. The only thing is we need to assess how it is going forward and how much they are really allocating for this particular COE, Center of Excellence. I think that we have to ask Madam Sitaramanji. I think this message goes to her also. We wish to know how closely it is monitored. This is already, I think, the Joint Secretary Mr. Yuvraj Singh stated the other day that the moonshot they were already identified. There are around 7 Center of Excellences were identified. They are working on it. But we need to go into the details how really they help into developing the new inventions and how it really going to help the industry also. I think a lot of things are there. But budget per se, it is helpful. But the other, one more thing I wanted to mention, because we belong to MSMEs. What is there in MSMEs in the budget? And we wanted to know whatever the new inventions, and they should not be monopolized. So what my personal point of view from the industry where I am representing from CII and the Federation of Pharma Entrepreneurs, we want this a total control of the union government, whatever is helping, be it risk funding, be it the funding for the R&D, and extending the help in other ways to all these COEs, the Center of Excellences, can be shared with the MSMEs. Okay. Group of industries. Okay. So that the affordable drug, and that statement can be maintained in the future also.
If I can take that point forward, Uday Bhaskar ji, if I can come to you. Research and development, quite frankly, is like a generic phrase that seems like a solution to all problems. What is the nature of research and development that we must be seeking in the pharmaceutical sector? We understand that we are leaders in the world in generic medicines, and generic medicines are medicines, as a layperson, if I may say, of which the formulations are available for us to reproduce. We invest our labor force and invest technology, and we produce those medicines. Research and development for original development of innovations, where do we stand in the country? And therefore, what is the direction of research and development we're looking for in the budget?
As you have rightly mentioned, predominantly we are generic players. If you see the kind of amount we are spending for R&D, in India we are spending 0.7% of our GDP on R&D. The other countries, other than India, most of the countries are spending almost 2.5%. If you see the expenditure of Indian companies, they are spending 7% on R&D. If you see the same in developed world, it is 15 to 25%. So our focus was always there on producing conventional generic drugs, and we are happy with that. Except 7-8 companies, the other companies, they are not at all spending money, even though they are cash-rich companies. So they don't want to take risk. The reason is that you need to spend a lot of money. You need to wait for 8 to 10 years. There is no guarantee that you are going to have the business. So these are all difficult situations. Unfortunately, our government is also not seriously thinking about supporting R&D. So we are asking from industry side.
But the budget does mention that R&D is a focus.
I'm coming to that point.
Evaluate how.
The pharmaceutical industry is happy that earlier they never mentioned in budget about the pharma also. This is the first time in the union budget they have mentioned about innovation and R&D for pharmaceutical industry. Again, they have made a point that through Center of Excellences. So there, you need to have two parallel organizations. One is giving funds to the Center of Excellence, like national research institutions like NCL Pune or IICT or any other organizations. Again, they need to give funding to the industry directly. The people who are spending and they are coming forward to spend money on innovation. If you continue to manufacture the conventional generic drugs, in the days to come, it's very tough for India to sustain the name of pharmacy of the world. You need to work on complex generics, you need to work on biosimilars, you need to work on vaccines. Vaccines also, 60% of our national immunization program or WHO procurement or general vaccines we are manufacturing. But if you see the potent and more vaccines, one company's turnover of the Europe is much bigger than that entire Indian pharmaceutical manufacturers vaccine sale. I'll come to one more point, particularly the collaboration. That's what the government is talking about in this budget between the national research institutions or center of excellences and the industry. Industry and the collaboration with the national institutions definitely will be successful. The COVID has made that possible. The collaboration between Bharat Biotech and National Institute of Virology and ICMR.
Right.
We developed an indigenous vaccine of Covaxin. So we surprised the entire world. So this kind of an initiation with more thirst and more funding, and we need to have a roadmap, how much funds are going to be allotted, how they are going to support the industry if I wanted to do. The research institutions, most of the pharmaceutical industry sitting here, they are working very closely with NCL Pune and IICT and they are collaborating. But at the end of the day, it comes to the commercialization. So there are so many issues. So if any industry is having a funds and they are ready to spend money to work on these new chemical entities or new drugs or innovation and research, they should be supported.
Right. Let's get a perspective on that from Bhavish Pujara. Mr. Pujara, you manage the finances for, you've had experience of managing finances for leading pharma companies. Help us understand the kind of priority that is given to research and development of and innovation. We understand it's a risky venture. It's possible that development of a new, say, blockbuster medicine, as it is often called, will take years. Perhaps it will not work out. The money will go down the drain, so to say. How is it seen, research and development? Then what is the expectation from the government on this front?
Right. So I think, in the overall scheme of things, it is important to understand the research and development in the context of the generic industry. So it's not just that we, reproduce a knowledge which is existing. So you don't have to do any research. It's not like that. So you really need to work on your own way and develop a product which then you have to establish an equivalence with a reference drug, which is, let's say, innovated by some of these big pharma companies. So there is a heavy bit of R&D work is already involved in whatever the generic pharma industry does. Mr. Bhaskar quoted the context in terms of numbers, right? So we, let's say, as an industry, spend 7% of our turnover on the R&D activity, but that turnover reflects a much smaller pie of the value chain. A 15% of sales for a big pharma is a very different ball game than a 7% of sales for a much smaller value share of a particular product. So in that context, now when we talk about innovation in the new molecular entities or new chemical entities and new biological entities, these are really very expensive propositions. One product, if you try to develop, you will have chance of success in 1 or 2 out of 10. So effectively, it will cost somewhere around $2 to $3 billion. It will take 10 years even for you to be able to establish the success of a candidate. So that kind of wherewithal.
But Bhavishji, the countries who are doing it, how are they managing their finances? Is it public investment, private investment? What is driving such high-tech
these countries which we are talking about, they are much more evolved and big pharma markets, right? So for example, US would be about $800 billion market. We are $25 billion, right? So that kind of commercial attraction is one part. The second part is the way government engages with the industry in trying to mitigate this risk. That is the second element. But I think I want to point out one more dimension, that innovation need not be just confined to discovery of new medicines.
Sure.
Innovation has multiple dimensions. Innovation is also about how do we, make the medicine affordable and accessible, which is what we are already doing. Right? Innovation is also about how do you take these solutions to the patient. That is also something that as an industry and as a country we are doing a lot of things. The other dimension of innovation is the next frontiers of the pharma industry is about complex generics. So there will be generics, but it will take much more than what we have done in past to be able to get into that space. So things like creating a copy of or creating a follow-on version of a biologics, it will cost at least 8 to 10 times more than what it is costing to develop a generic for a chemical entity. So I think, these are gradual dimensions to innovations. Talking about NCEs and NBEs, I think it's not that it should not be in our radar, but it will take a lot of time for us as a country, as an economy, to be able to develop that kind of strength. Having said that, the concept of innovation is something that we need to engage on. Government is already thinking about it. In the budget, there is an announcement on the focus on the incentivizing research. There is a scheme on the lines of PLI, which I think has got a tremendous success when it comes to boosting the manufacturing. A similar scheme for research link incentive is being conceived for the pharma industry. We'll have to see what are the contours and the framework around it. But the key part here is that if these kind of research initiatives are beyond the means of the pharma players, how do we enable them to be able to undertake this kind of risk, and how do we make the funds available in the context of taking this kind of risk?
Right. I think that's a very important point, Bhavesh, about rethinking what innovation also means. In simple terms, we leaders in generic medicines, we're looking at countries who are leaders in branded, innovative research. I mean, is there a possibility of imagining a hybrid model where we are also creating new and yet retain our strengths? Mr. Nagarjuna Maladi, if I can come to you, to imagine that sort of hybrid world where we are able to develop areas where we still have to work on, what kind of a roadmap is the budget, according to you, putting across?
See, in my opinion, I think some of the opinions that other leaders had given making perfect sense to me. If you look at a business equation here, and he said it right, India pharma market is around $46 billion. We took a surge last year because of whatever has happened in pandemic. If you look at world, kind of overall market is more than 1.42 trillion. If you look at the way the predictions are by 2030, it is going to grow something like 3.5 or 3.6 trillion. If you look at the world market. At the same time, the prediction with India is about 130 billion. There is a business case. It's like the developing countries, the amount of trust they had put in, like the sir was mentioning, right? Any of these research intensive exercises from phase 1 to final approval, the 9.1% is a success rate. And the regulations in the past 1 decade, even in the developing countries, 2,000 new regulations have come up. That will, basically it's a roadblock. And after all, it's like anywhere between 5 to 6 years to come up with a molecule bare minimum, $2 billion kind of an investment. End of it, once your product in the market, the success rate is 50%. So there are risks around it, but at the same time, there is a reward mechanism. You're talking about a $3.x trillion market. In my opinion, the budget, having learned from whatever has happened in the past 2 years due to the pandemic, that is shown. One is Make in India. Secondly, we have taken an audacious goal of making this country $5 trillion economy, which is nice. And we say that health is wealth. If you want to create wealth, the $1 trillion should come from there is an audacious goal. And like other esteemed speakers are talking about, connecting the dots in terms of ease of doing the business, getting the academia into the play, encourage the entrepreneurship in terms of research area. Overall, I think we are positioned well, is my feeling with the budget actually.
And if we talk about the technological interventions, one of the things that the budget does is puts greater focus on Industry 4.0
Yeah,
skill sets.
absolutely.
There is AI, there is
Yeah.
machine learning.
Yeah.
We are aware of this term, but here we're talking about
Yeah.
educating the youth, the masses, with these skills. What implications are they likely to have for the pharmaceutical sector? Mr. Chakravarti, if I can come to you with that point, what opportunities lie there?
I don't know, but my opinion will be a little exaggerated. A couple of years ago, I was predicting which will be the #1 company in the world, #1 pharmaceutical or healthcare company in the world. May not be Roche, may not be Novartis, may not be Pfizer. Probably Google, IBM, Microsoft. Anything is possible because it is relevant to the question you asked, Shubhendu. The digital transformation, we are still at the nascent level. Not only in India, the world is at nascent level.
Correct.
The integration of the holistic digital technology into the pharmaceutical technology. For example, as a pharmaceutical entrepreneurs, we all have we have biologics, we have chemicals, we have everything related to the product. And you have now we are talking about ChatGPT, Bard, whatnot. I think
Yes.
what is in the anvil we never know. And now coming to the very point, that see, the one thing we should not mistake, digitization is different, digital transformation is different. For example, drug discovery. I think we need to understand what is the pandemic has also taught us lessons. What was thought of impossible, rolling out the necessary vaccines, which otherwise would not have been possible at least 4 to 5 years down the line, because this is what the industry captains told me when the pandemic hit us. But eventually, we were able to get the vaccines in time just because the accelerated drug delivery. No doubt, I think digital transformation has really helped it. And not only vaccines, and remember, it is not bypassing all the protocols originally required. All that people are doing it, whatever the required tests, whatever the protocols need to be followed with the help of the digital technology, that we are able to achieve. For example, if a drug takes 10 years down the line, I think it is condensing to 5 years. That's a big achievement. In the future also, future is changing. It is more than prevention, more of a prevention than a cure. Cell therapy, gene therapy we are talking about, they are still in the nascent stage. But future belongs to this. Future belongs to the preventive core, where the digital technology plays a vital role.
Right, and I think these technological interventions are already in place. Mr. Uday Bhaskar, the example of the...
if I can,
Yes.
this is now. If I
sorry.
can add to what
Yes, please.
Chakravarti has to do. Kind of,
Yes.
I liked the way he put. It is not about digitization versus digital transformation. I'm sorry, actually, I took some time.
Absolutely.
It was my experience during the pandemic time. I know there is one of the, I don't want to name the company, it is one of the top 5 pharma companies in North America. They have global operations as well. And it was our intervention to go them and tell them how we can, put up an automation mechanism using robotic process automation and machine learning. And those efforts were unsuccessful till the pandemic hit the road. And by the time when pandemic hit, we got the invitation from them, and within 3 months we put together a AI intervention which is driven by robotic process automation, which accelerated their supply chain. So even like he was telling, even in the developed countries, digitization is also a, kind of a question there. There is a lot of room, especially in the drug discovery area, in the R&D area, huge room for transformation, in my opinion.
Right.
Sorry to cut it, but I just want to share this experience.
That's a valid point. And in the digital transformation, may I also add platforms like CoWIN, identification and delivery of drugs. Mr. Uday Bhaskar, I was coming to you with that point. Being so close to the pandemic and the manner in which we witness speedy creation of vaccines, I mean, indigenous development and also helping the world manufacture vaccines. If you could give us some insight as to how did that come about? We believe a lot of technological interventions, machine learning also played a part. What usually traditionally is done over a period of a decade was done in a span of few months. How did we achieve that in the country, and can it be replicated ahead?
I don't know anything about artificial intelligence and these are all digital transformation.
Yes.
I don't know all these things. My point is that during the pandemic, so the entire world was talking about developing a vaccine. Somebody said that it takes 3 years, it takes 4 years, and it's very difficult to come up with a vaccine with the shortest possible time without knowing the virus, how it behaves. So there was a very good collaboration between the national institutions like ICMR and NIV and private public partnership. The government also was proactive. In India as well as in other countries also, they have given funding to the institutions, and the Prime Minister of India is also very active in that process actually.
Right. In fact, and that model of public-private partnership, could that be transformative? Bhavesh, what are your thoughts on it? This whole idea of the manner in which the nation, the public sector, private sector came together in the moment of crisis. Can that become a norm in a country like ours?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then there are multiple dimensions of these collaborations. The dimension around public-private partnership on finding solutions, public-private partnership on skill development, public-private partnership on creating financing solution. And when it comes to research, there is another dimension to it, which is, we already spoke about it, which is the industry and academia collaboration, which is also where public or let's say government has to play a key role. And I think this has been a proven model across the world.
Yes, and this association and coordination between academia and the industry, again, going back to the budget statement, with mention of nursing homes coming in alongside working hospitals, such development of such infrastructure and the people who are going to be trained in that, they have a role to play in the pharma sector in the days ahead.
So they will definitely have a role to play in the overall healthcare system.
Sure.
And by extension, that will have potential on the pharma sector as well. However, one of the key dimension of the industry academia collaboration is also on the research and innovation, right? And this is a very established model in the developed world, where many of the innovation is generated through research driven by the academia, which is sponsored or collaborated by the industry. We don't have that kind of ecosystem. And I think the intention or the statement in the budget is pointing towards that intention to develop that kind of ecosystem.
Right. Mr. Chakravarti,
yeah, I have a point, if you allow me, Shubhendu. The digital transformation is close to my heart, even though I don't know much about it, but I know the outset. I am also predicting how and why India has an edge in the future, in the healthcare sector, in the pharmaceutical sector. Because one must agree, we are leaders in information technology, we are leaders in the pharmaceuticals in a way, in the healthcare. If we have a proper synergies between these sectors, which is possible as per me, because today the whole, whatever the best of the best IT companies have their, we used to talk their back offices used to be here. No, their front offices are here. So India has become a Silicon Valley already, be it Bangalore or Hyderabad or Pune or anywhere. Now, how come it is relevant to our pharmaceutical industry? I must say, the digital transformation is not in the drug discovery, not in the manufacturing of the drugs. It's a total value chain. The future is going to, it's not just prescribing few drugs and giving to the patient and helping them cure the disease. It's not going to be. It's completely the patient-centric. If I'm not wrong, some companies have already developed few apps, and after prescribing a drug, once the patient accesses the medicine, it actually enables the condition of the patient and gives back the signal to the physician, and then it comes back. It's a holistic purview, and the patient at the end of the day, he is a happy man. So with that, it's a win-win situation. Not only for the pharmaceutical companies, but also at the end of the day, the patient is safeguarded, the patient centricity is being felt. The future belongs to that. And when you talk about digital transformation, we heard a couple of days ago about the virtual medical representatives. It's not depriving of the opportunities of the pharmacists, let me say. The future is going to change. I'm not elaborating that, I'm just throwing
Sure.
it. Another thing, one more thing, just very simply, augmented reality into your product. So far, you prescribed a drug, you're accessing the drug either by e-pharmacy or going to your pharmacy physically or whatever. And then you're reading the label, you're getting to know probably, okay, the NFCs and QR codes and all, get that. But augmented reality, getting into that, with just a simple scan from your normal cell phone, you have a virtual virtual assistant coming onto that, and it's going to speak to you. Here is a challenge to the Indian techies. I think one of them is sitting besides me. The future belongs to them because the real-time augmented reality is not yet come. Not only in the Western world, also in India. Whoever comes faster on this, I think this is going to be winner. And this will be big value addition also on the pricing of the drugs eventually. And this will be a big booster also. I am predicting this in the future. Augmented reality, real time, which helps the patient eventually along with the basic drugs. The combination of this is going to be a big winner. This
Right,
is perspective.
right. If I can turn to our audience members and if we can have a question. Ajay has a question. Ajay, why don't you?
Yeah, thanks very much. Nagarjuna sir, as you said that we are the $50 billion economy, we might go to $130 billion by 2030. We are already a part of, in a sense, pharma capital of the world, but the budget's main focus is on the nursing and creating HR for, the pharma industry. Do we have the capacity to become the nursing capital of the world or on the paramedical side? Manufacturing of drugs is one thing, but HR around that medical ecosystem, and I think central government or central budget cannot do much about that because health is a state subject and it is the state government's duty also to put in money for the skill development, for creating nursing colleges, for creating good quality of the HR into pharma and related activities. So where do we go forward from here in terms of creating the nurses, the paramedical staff along with the the product that we are talking about, currently discussing? So any one of the panelists is free to take the question. Thank you.
Would you like to take it?
Take the question to me. I will start the question. I'm sure they will answer it better. And how I understood this whole the pharma, life sciences, or the overall the domain is there are four facets to it. One is you talk about life sciences pharma, which is the point of discussion for today, and then we have this payer, the insurance companies, and then you have the providers, the hospitals. And then finally you got medical devices. It is a sector by itself actually. But to me, budget got covered the two angles of it. And speakers spoke about the patient-centric, kind of a approach is what I saw definitely. One is prevention is better than cure, like Mr. Chakravarti mentioned. Secondly, when it happens, how do you take care about them? In my opinion, the budget focused both the areas, and they also talked about the upskilling. Minister herself talked about it. In my opinion, they kind of focused a kind of a encompassed approach of handling the whole sector is what I definitely saw. And exactly on the 10 terms related to the nurses and the training, all that I'm sure the esteemed speakers would add a lot of value. But how I understood budget is in a nutshell, Ajay.
Right. Mr. Uday Bhaskar, if I can come to a point about it's called Amritkal budget. The vision is to become self-reliant in a period by the time we celebrate 100 years of independence. Now, a little research into the pharmaceutical sector in the country. We leaders in generic medicines, but if we look at the API, active pharmaceutical ingredients, much of it, some figures place it at 70% of it is imported from China. What then, how difficult does the road to self-reliance then becomes? How do you see this dichotomy in the sector?
I would like to hear the question again.
Sure. Sir, this whole, the kind of import dependence that India still has as far as the basic ingredients of making the drugs are concerned, active pharmaceutical ingredient, I believe, are essential components of giving final touches to the medicines. Much of it comes from China. How do we tackle these challenges?
Everybody is calling India as a pharmacy of the world.
Yes.
But this pharmacy of the world is importing 75% of active pharmaceutical ingredients or basic chemicals or intermediates. So earlier also we were very strong in API industry and fermentation technology. Of late, keeping view of the business dynamics, Indian pharmaceutical industry shifted to the finished dose formulations. They left the API industry and fermentation to the Chinese. So now they become very big, and now it's almost Chinese chemical industry is 1.7 trillion. So India is dependent on China. So like Europe also, now dependent on China. These are the factors actually responsible for this. Now we left API industry. Again, we are trying to revive. That is, the government has realized that there is a crying need to revive Indian pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
And the API industry, they announced that PLI scheme.
Right.
So this scheme need to go around and to make India, at least to reduce the dependence So we need to work in that direction, and Indian pharmaceutical industry also realized, and the companies like Aurobindo is coming up with the fermentation technology, and that is as far as fermentation technology, Mr. Krishna Reddy may differ. That most of the fermentation technology is also completely handled by the Chinese.
Right. Mr. Bhavesh Pujara, conversation on the idea of import dependence does point towards how about developing and working on the strengths that we've had traditionally. In the budget, we're talking about natural farming, we're talking about Ayurveda, we're talking about well-being and preventive healthcare. The native strengths that India has had. What is the potential for more investment in that and making it stronger to not just export it? We're exporting yoga today to the world. We're exporting our wellness industry. In the core pharmaceutical industry, what is the potential scope there is for our native medicines to occupy a prominent space?
Sure. So, I mean, it's altogether a different dimension.
Sure.
So, I'll come to that in a bit. But just to address the first part of the background that you put across, right? So, like Mr. Bhaskar explained, while we moved up the value chain, we lost the ground. It's not that we didn't have the capabilities. We had capabilities on anti-infectives, we had capabilities on fermentation, we had capabilities for penicillin G. And as the industry as a whole started moving up, we started losing focus, and this has been an area which has become a concern for us in the context of the supply chain disruption, initially caused by pollution issues in China, then by COVID, and now because of the geopolitical issues. So this has become suddenly a matter of vulnerability. However, we are sitting in Hyderabad. There are enough and more examples in this region where companies, including the one which I come from, have stuck to the core conviction of controlling the value chain across. So, and then there are enough and more examples, like I said. So it's something that is the knowledge and the capability and the ecosystem is there. It's just that we have lost out on investment. There is an initiative from the government. We will have to see whether it is meaningful and significant in terms of size and proportion.
Right.
Maybe there may be a need to do more. But that's definitely one area which we need to address. The second question that you asked, it's not actually a substitution. So this part of the value chain where we are completely integrated in the global pharma system.
Coexistence of
yeah, so that is essential. When it comes to alternative forms of medications, each and every country will have their own way of looking at this particular aspects in terms of the regulations, in terms of the quality standards, and in terms of the amount of scientific evidence that needs to be established to basically allow this kind of treatments. But when it comes to preventive aspects of, let's say, Ayurveda or general health and well-being aspects of it, that's where I think there is a lot of potential, not just outside but also in our country itself, right? So I think that bit of it is more about, like I said, on the prevention and the well-being side.
Right. So that's pretty much all the time we had to take this conversation forward. But many takeaways, the manner in which research and development should be carried forward, the ways in which India's inherent strength should be maintained while we seek to develop our pharma sector in diverse areas. On that note, let me also thank our esteemed panel members, Mr. Uday Bhaskar, Mr. Bhavesh Pujara, Mr. Chakravarti AVPS, and Sri Nagarjuna Maladi. Thank you very much for joining us in this conversation. Round of applause if we can have for our
thank you very much.
Guest members. And with that, we conclude this special edition of DD Dialogue Amritkal Budget. Namaskar.
मन की बात है जन जन की, संघर्षों